Hi everyone. This short video will show you how easy it is to start seeds indoors with a few tips and tricks along the way. So let's get started. So I use two types of seed trays. These four are the self-watering style. You can see the little floating water gauge that goes in the corners. So they draw water up from the base tray through a weeping fabric, kind of like felt. I also use the traditional black seed trays, which I'll show you later, but we'll start off with these. Here you can see on the bottom of the trays are open, so the soil can come in contact once packed in there with that weeping fabric. So you can start adding your soil. Make sure you use a good quality potting soil and just lightly place in the holes and spread it out evenly. It's best to work in an area where you can kind of get messy. You're going to sprinkle some dirt here and there and water, so put a towel down or some newspaper. I work here in this video in our basement next to the laundry sink, so it makes cleanup pretty easy, and there's fairly decent lighting there too, so kind of keep the mess all in one place. So the goal is to evenly place the soil in each hole. It's pretty straightforward. Don't pack it down yet, just make sure everything is every hole is pretty much evenly distributed with soil. Your potting soil should have some vermiculite and peat moss or peat inside. Don't use garden soil, it'll compact and won't give the seeds a good start. It just is too dense for the seeds to establish their roots. So make sure you spend the money, get a decent potting soil. You don't need much at this stage, and later on when you transfer to larger containers you can use a different type of cheaper soil. I only put the minimum amount of water in the bottom of the tray base just to get the fabric weeping up that initial water. You don't want to fill this too much full of water because you're going to have to carry this and put it in wherever you're going to have it, in your little greenhouse or next to a window. So you don't want to carry it full of water because you'll spill it everywhere. So only put as much water as you need for that fabric to start sucking up the water. In the traditional black seed trays, you water from above instead of it being sucked from below. So yeah, both are great for seed starting. Both options are great. These trays were on sale a few years ago. I got them from the Valley store here in Ontario, Canada. The next step is to lightly tamp down each hole so it's nice and even, and also your reason you're doing this is that when the seeds germinate, they want to be able to kind of establish a good root system. If the soil is too light, it may become too loose, and the water also would not be absorbed as well. So tamp it down with a tool similar to this. Try to be even with the soil amounts. Now make sure you leave room after your tamping to put down your seeds and then add a little bit more soil on top, so don't fill it right up to the top. The next step is to take out any little twigs or chunks, hard pieces that's going to kind of compete with the seeds. So I use a tweezer as a good tool to do that, but you can do that with your hands as well. Now this is an important step, I feel, is to make basically a grid of your trays. Depending on how your tray looks, it's going to be different for you. But take the time to do a sheet for each tray, draw out a grid. That way you can fill in what's in each square, and you won't be guessing or second guessing yourself later on. So make sure that you do this step so you're not forgetting what went where, basically. So don't forget to number your pages to correspond with the number on your trays. So you know, just in case things get shuffled around, each tray is numbered, it corresponds to each page. Next step is to add your seeds. So you can see here I use a glass container. The reason I use glass, it's easy to see, easy to pick out the seeds, but most importantly, glass doesn't really hold a static charge, and I found I used to use a styrofoam tray for the seeds or plastic, and sometimes those build up a static charge, and what happens is the seeds cling to the container. Here you see my bin with the potting soil, so it's convenient, it's right next to where I'm working. Just use some type of scoop, get it all nice and loose, make sure it's not wet. You don't want to work with wet soil, it's pretty hard to manage. So once we have our seeds, we're going to add a nice light layer of soil on top. Read your instructions on your seed packet if you need to, depending on how far down the seeds have to be sowed. In this case, it's just a light layer on top. Try to spread it evenly. Hopefully you don't get it all over the place, but it does happen. And then the next step is to just kind of even it out with your hand without obviously moving the seeds around. Okay, you're not, you have to be kind of careful at this stage that you're not removing the seeds by doing this, but just be gentle. And then use that little tamping device. Again, you can use something else, like a highlighter or a pen. I just happen to have this, it's actually I think part of a kid's play set for outside. It's like a steak, ground steak, but it kind of works perfectly to tamp it down lightly. Okay, next stage here is to water. Now you want to be very careful at this stage not to be too much with the pressure of the water. You could blow the seeds out. So don't flood it, just give it a light spray, whether it's a spray bottle that you work by hand, or this one I bought, it's a 2 liter, like a half-gallon pump sprayer, garden pump sprayer. And I like it that it has the extended wand. That way I can get pretty accurately into each nook and cranny. So it's a great little tool, and I do have a link in the description, along with some other links for some of the tools I use. But this is a great little bottle. You just pump it a few times and it has enough pressure just to kind of lightly spray. Comes with a couple of different nozzles as well. So yeah, give it a good soak for the first watering, and then after that with this type of tray you don't have to water again. Basically it sucks it up from below. But a traditional tray you would have to water either every day or every other day. So here's the grid with the number 1, and I use just a 2-letter system or a 3-letter, whatever, just to tell me what they are. So for instance, like SD is Snapdragon and YT Yellow Tomato. So just it's a simple grid, doesn't have to be fancy, just so you don't forget where everything is. So here's my indoor greenhouse. Again, nothing fancy. It's got 4 levels, 4 tiers, and just some shop lights, just some cheap shop lights. They're fluorescent lighting. The reason I go with fluorescent is because it gives off a bit of heat, and LEDs generally don't give off much heat, and people will want to use heat mats and all that. Well, this gives off enough heat that I kind of don't need heating mats underneath the trays. So it's nice and warm in there. I sometimes do use just LED bulbs later on once the plants have started, to give them a little bit extra light, but these do the trick. You actually don't need a lot of light to start seeds generally. It's more about warmth and water. Once they're above the soil, then yes, obviously they're going to need the light, and sometimes brighter light than what I have here. But again, I sometimes add some LED lights, but not grow lights, just regular bulbs. So what I've done is I filled up the tray with some water, so now it's right full. You can see the floating gauge and the little red stick is in the max area. So every 3 to 4 days, I'd say you'd fill it up. Here's some a side table I have with some of the tools I need, some liquid fertilizer, a bottle of water with a special cap on top for spraying into that tray, and then that pump sprayer I was talking about. The fertilizer I use is 10-15-10 by Schultz. Again, a link in the description for that stuff. But it works well. So this is Mylar. You'll see it as survival blanket at dollar store. They're not very expensive. What I do is I line the inside of the greenhouse with it, and it kind of almost doubles the light output that the plants receive because it's being reflected back. So here's the trays with the dome covers on for those 4. Those are the self-watering trays. Again, just cheap shop lights on top. Here's the traditional black trays on the bottom. And this is within the first week you start seeing some growth. Generally, the ones you see first are like tomatoes, cucumbers, marigolds are very quick to pop their heads out. So that's pretty much what you're seeing here. Again, this style of tray you don't have to water because it will take it from that reservoir down below. So you can just see barely peeking out. It's kind of the exciting time, it's like if you keep your fingers crossed and things start to happen. Now you won't get 100% success. There's going to be seeds that just are either too old or they don't have the right conditions for some reason. They're just not going to go, and so don't worry about it. You're going to have a few cells and seeds that don't produce anything, but aim for a 70-80% success rate. If you follow these instructions, you have good success. So there you see the traditional black seed trays. And I also recovered some seeds from like sedums and some seeds in parks that in the fall we went around and just collected some seeds and just kind of tried to see if they're going to germinate. So I can say that yes, some of the seeds we collected, some ground covers, sedums, and different style of plants that we haven't had before. I collected some seeds and stored them over the winter and tried them out, and some of them are germinating. So fingers crossed they'll grow into some nice plants. You can see the tomatoes are getting a little leggy there. Sometimes if you have your light too high, they'll reach for the light at a quick rate, and then they become a little bit weak. So try to keep your light as low as you can to the plant. It's a bit of a challenge sometimes because all the plants grow at different rates. But yeah. If you're in a really cold basement, which some basements are pretty cold, you may want to run a little space heater, for a little while in the morning when you first turn on your lights, just to get the warmth back into the greenhouse, and then the lights take over from there. That's what I do sometimes. I just have a little space heater outside, and I leave the front door of this little greenhouse open and warm things up. So thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell, and I appreciate you watching. Best of luck with your plants.